I never expected my own wife to try and steal everything I'd built with a fabricated video. But sometimes the truth has a way of hitting back harder than any lie. What happened next in that courtroom would change both our lives forever, and the sweet taste of justice would prove that no amount of manipulation could stand against cold, hard evidence. If you're enjoying this already, smash like, subscribe, and most importantly, give this video a hype. And I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country down in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The heavy oak doors of Courtroom 3B creaked as I pushed them open, my footsteps echoing against the polished marble floor like a countdown to destiny. I walked in with nothing but a simple black briefcase and my attorney, Marcus Chen, a man whose quiet confidence spoke louder than any flashy suit ever could. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the wooden benches that would soon witness one of the most pivotal moments of my life. The courthouse had that particular smell that all old buildings carry, a mixture of wood polish, aged paper, and decades of human drama that had played out within these walls. I'd been in courtrooms before for business disputes, but never as the defendant in what had become a bitter personal war. "Good morning, David," Marcus whispered as we took our seats at the defendant's table. "Remember what we discussed. Stay calm no matter what happens. Let her show her true colors to the judge." I nodded, adjusting my navy tie and glancing around the nearly empty courtroom. My hands were steady. Steadier than they'd been in months, actually. There's something liberating about finally getting your day in court, about knowing that the truth you've been carrying like a weight is about to be set free. The silence was almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that was about to unfold. I could hear the distant sounds of the city through the windows. Traffic humming, construction work, the normal rhythm of life continuing while my world hung in the balance. Then she arrived. The courtroom doors burst open like she was making a grand entrance at a movie premiere, and honestly, knowing Sarah, that's probably exactly how she saw it. She strutted in wearing a designer black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her stiletto heels clicking against the floor with military precision. Her makeup was flawless, the kind that takes hours to perfect, and her hair was styled in elaborate waves that cascaded over her shoulders like she was posing for a magazine cover. "Well, well," I muttered under my breath. "The performance has begun." Everything about her entrance was calculated for maximum dramatic effect. She paused in the doorway just long enough to ensure everyone had noticed her, then made her way to the plaintiff's table with the kind of confident stride that suggested she thought she'd already won. Behind her walked her attorney, Richard Hawthorne, a man whose reputation for ruthless tactics was only matched by his astronomical hourly rate. His silver hair was slicked back with expensive pomade, and his Armani suit screamed money and arrogance. He carried himself like a predator who had already tasted blood, his briefcase swinging jauntily at his side. I'd done my research on Hawthorne. 3 divorces of his own, all messy. A reputation for taking cases he knew he could win through intimidation and theatrics rather than actual legal merit. The kind of lawyer who charged by the hour and never met a billable minute he didn't like. Sarah's eyes locked onto mine across the courtroom, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something. Uncertainty? Fear? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that familiar smug expression I'd grown to despise over the past 6 months of separation. "Your Honor will see today," Hawthorne announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, clearly playing to the growing audience, "that my client has been the victim of systematic abuse and financial manipulation. Justice demands swift action." The courtroom began to fill with spectators, friends, family members, and curious onlookers drawn by the promise of drama. I recognized some faces. My business partner, Jake, who'd driven 3 hours to be here for moral support. Sarah's sister, Jennifer, who looked uncomfortable and kept avoiding eye contact with me. Several neighbors who'd probably come for the entertainment value. I could hear the hushed whispers starting already. "Is that really his wife? I heard she's going for everything he owns. This is going to be brutal. My money's on her. Look at that lawyer." Judge Patricia Morrison entered, her black robes flowing behind her as she took her place at the bench. A woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, She had a reputation for running a tight courtroom and having zero tolerance for theatrics. I'd specifically requested her when given the choice. Marcus had told me she was fair but tough, exactly what we needed. "All rise!" the bailiff called out, his voice booming through the chamber. The room stood as one, the shuffling of feet and rustling of clothes creating a symphony of anticipation. Judge Morrison settled into her chair and surveyed the room with the practiced eye of someone who had seen every kind of human drama imaginable. She took her time, making notes, organizing her papers, clearly establishing that this was her courtroom and things would proceed at her pace, not anyone else's. "Please be seated," she said finally, her voice carrying the authority of decades on the bench. "We are here today for the matter of Blackwood versus Blackwood. Counsel, please state your appearances for the record." Hawthorne rose first, his movements theatrical and designed to command attention. "Your Honor, Richard Hawthorne of Hawthorne, Pierce and Associates representing the plaintiff, Sarah Elizabeth Blackwood. We are here today seeking justice for years of systematic abuse, financial manipulation, and emotional trauma inflicted upon my client by her husband." The way he said husband made it sound like a dirty word. Marcus stood with quiet dignity, a stark contrast to Hawthorne's bombast. "Marcus Chen, of Chen and Associates for the defendant, David James Blackwood, Your Honor." "Thank you, counselors," Judge Morrison replied, making notes. "Mr. Hawthorne, you may begin with your opening statement. Please keep it focused and factual." Her demands. A ridiculous list. Hawthorne approached the bench with swagger, clearly playing to the gallery. "Your Honor, my client sits before you not seeking revenge, but justice. For 7 years, she endured psychological abuse while supporting her husband's success." I felt my jaw clench. The audacity was breathtaking, but this was exactly what Marcus had predicted. "Today, we ask this court to award her what is rightfully hers." Hawthorne pulled out a thick document. "First, we demand full ownership of Blackwood Consulting LLC, a company built on my client's support and sacrifice." I whispered to Marcus, "She never even knew what my company did." "Second, we demand the vintage 1953 Rolex Submariner, representing the time stolen from my client. The watch my dying father had given me, which Sarah had always called old and ugly. Third, custody of their golden retriever, Einstein, my client's emotional support companion. The same dog she'd wanted me to give, away 3 times because his fur got on her designer clothes. Finally, $750,000 in damages for mental anguish and the years of therapy she'll require." Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. "These are comprehensive demands. You have evidence to support these allegations?" "Indeed we do, Your Honor. Evidence that will shock this courtroom." Sarah stood up, tears in her eyes. "Your Honor, I just want what's fair. I gave him my best years and got only pain in return." Marcus leaned over to me. "Let them overplay their hand. The bigger the lie, the harder it falls." After a brief recess that felt like an eternity, the courtroom reassembled with an electric tension in the air. Sarah had spent the 15 minutes touching up her makeup and whispering conspiratorially with Hawthorne, occasionally glancing in my direction with what could only be described as predatory satisfaction. During the break, I'd noticed more people filing into the gallery. Word had apparently gotten out that this was going to be a show, and the seats were now packed with curious onlookers hoping to witness a spectacular legal drama. "Your Honor," Hawthorne announced as he stood, his voice carrying the gravity of a prosecutor about to reveal damning evidence in a murder trial. "We now present evidence that will definitively prove our case. Evidence so compelling, so undeniable, that no reasonable person could question the validity of my client's claims." He wheeled in a large monitor on a mobile cart, the kind typically used for multimedia presentations. The screen flickered to life, displaying his law firm's logo in gold letters before going black. "What you are about to see," he continued, his voice dropping to a grave whisper that somehow carried throughout the silent courtroom, "is video footage taken from inside the Blackwood residence. Footage that my client courageously recorded to document the abuse she suffered, despite the obvious personal risk involved. The dramatic pause was perfectly timed. Every person in that courtroom was leaning forward, waiting to see what earth-shattering evidence was about to be revealed. Sarah stood up, and this time Judge Morrison didn't stop her. It was clearly part of their choreographed performance, rehearsed to perfection. "Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine emotion. "I recorded this footage secretly because I knew no one would believe me otherwise. He's very good at presenting a different face to the world. The charming businessman, the devoted husband. It's all a carefully crafted facade." She looked directly at me, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes that sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This wasn't even the woman who had screamed at me during our separation. This was something else entirely. A predator who had found her perfect hunting ground. I lived in terror in that house, Your Honor. Every day was a minefield, never knowing what small mistake might set him off, what innocent comment might trigger one of his rages. Her voice broke perfectly on cue, and several women in the gallery made sympathetic sounds. Hawthorne placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, his expression a masterpiece of righteous indignation. "Mrs. Blackwood, I know this is difficult, but could you tell the court about the specific night this video was recorded?" Sarah took a shuddering breath, as if gathering courage to relive a traumatic experience. It was 3 months ago on a Tuesday night. David had been drinking. He'd been drinking more and more lately, becoming increasingly paranoid and aggressive. I tried to talk to him about our problems, about maybe going to counseling to save our marriage, and he lost it completely. The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that for a moment I almost doubted my own memory. But I remembered that night perfectly. She had come home at 2 a.m., reeking of another man's cologne, lipstick smeared, her story about working late with clients falling apart the moment she opened her mouth. When I'd calmly asked where she'd been, she'd launched into a screaming tirade about my controlling behavior, throwing things and making threats before finally storming off to the guest bedroom. "I was terrified that night," Sarah continued, her performance growing more convincing with each word. I thought he might actually hurt me. So I used my phone to record what happened, hiding it where he wouldn't see it. I never thought I'd have to use the footage, but now." She trailed off, wiping away tears that seemed genuine. "Your Honor," Hawthorne announced solemnly, "we will now play the video evidence. I must warn the court that the content is disturbing and may be difficult to watch." The monitor came to life, showing the interior of our living room. The camera angle suggested it had been recorded from Sarah's phone, hidden somewhere near our entertainment center. The timestamp in the corner showed it was indeed from 3 months ago, just as she'd claimed. On screen, I saw myself sitting on our leather couch, still in my work clothes from that day. I looked tired, which made sense. I'd been working 14-hour days trying to land a major client, and the stress was showing. Sarah's voice could be heard from off-camera, though she wasn't visible in the shot. "David, we need to talk about us, about our marriage, about where we're going." "Now?" my on-screen self replied, sounding exhausted. "Sarah, it's after midnight. Can't this wait until tomorrow? It's always something with you, isn't it? Always an excuse to avoid dealing with our problems. Always putting me off until later, until tomorrow, until next week." The video showed me standing up, running my hands through my hair in obvious frustration. "I'm not avoiding anything. I just don't think the middle of the night is the best time for a serious conversation about our relationship." "For what? For me to have feelings? For me to matter in this marriage? When is a good time, David? When you decide it is?" This was where the video became truly insidious. Through careful editing, they had cut out the parts where Sarah had been screaming, where she'd thrown a wine glass at the wall hard enough to shatter it, where she'd called me every name in the book and accused me of having affairs with half my female clients. What remained looked like me dismissing her legitimate concerns and walking away from a woman who was simply trying to save her marriage. But the worst was yet to come. The video jumped forward, clearly edited, though the transition was smooth enough that it wasn't immediately obvious, to a moment where Sarah was on screen. She appeared to be reaching out to me, as if trying to bridge the emotional distance between us, when I seemed to grab her arm roughly, Without the context of the full conversation, without seeing her throw herself at me in a drunken rage while screaming threats, it looked like unprovoked aggression from a man who had finally lost control. "Don't touch me," her voice on the video pleaded, the fear seeming absolutely real. "Please, David, you're scaring me. I don't even recognize you anymore." The edited version cut to black just as I appeared to be raising my voice, though the audio had been manipulated to make my words unintelligible. Just an angry male voice that sounded threatening and violent. The courtroom was dead silent. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, could feel the weight of dozens of eyes judging me based on what they'd just witnessed. Several people in the gallery gasped audibly. One woman covered her mouth in shock. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God, how could he do that to her?" Judge Morrison's expression had shifted from neutral to deeply concerned. Her years of experience had clearly shown her domestic violence cases before, and what she'd just watched looked exactly like the kind of evidence that typically supported such claims. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said carefully, "is this the complete video from that evening?" "Yes, Your Honor. My client risked her own safety to capture this evidence of the abuse she suffered. As you can see, she was simply trying to communicate with her husband about their marital problems when he became violent and threatening." Sarah was crying now. Real tears that streaked down her cheeks and made her look like a genuine victim. "I was so scared that night, Your Honor. I thought he might really hurt me. I'd never seen him like that before, so angry, so completely out of control." The murmurs from the spectators were growing louder and more hostile toward me. I could feel the shift in the room's energy, the way dozens of pairs of eyes were now looking at me with disgust and condemnation. A few people had actually stood up and left, clearly unable to stomach being in the same room with someone they now believed was a domestic abuser. "That's not—" I started to say, but Marcus put a firm hand on my arm. "Not yet," he whispered urgently. "Let them finish hanging themselves." Hawthorne was basking in the moment, clearly savoring what he thought was his decisive victory. He walked slowly around the courtroom, making eye contact with spectators, building the drama like a master showman. "Your Honor, I think this video speaks for itself. My client has provided clear, unambiguous evidence of the abuse she suffered. No woman should have to live in fear in her own home. No woman should have to secretly record her own husband to prove her suffering and protect herself from further violence." He turned to look at me directly, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Mr. Blackwood has painted himself as the victim here, as the wronged party in this divorce. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, doesn't it? The truth has a way of cutting through lies and manipulation to show us who people really are when they think no one is watching." Sarah wiped her eyes delicately, careful not to smudge what remained of her makeup. She looked directly at me across the courtroom and mouthed silently, her lips barely moving. Game over. The confidence in her eyes was absolute. She truly believed she had won, that her carefully crafted deception had sealed my fate and secured her victory. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations and shifting bodies as Judge Morrison called for order. The weight of condemnation hung heavy in the air like a physical force, and I could feel the collective judgment of everyone present pressing down on my shoulders. Several more people had gotten up and left during the commotion, clearly disgusted by what they believed they had witnessed. Those who remained were staring at me with a mixture of revulsion and morbid curiosity, waiting to see how I would respond to such damning evidence. "Mr. Chen," Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying a new edge of seriousness. "I assume you'd like to respond to this evidence?" Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm despite the charged atmosphere. He looked completely unruffled, as if he'd been expecting exactly what we'd just witnessed. In fact, he seemed almost relaxed. "Your Honor," he said in his measured tone, straightening his tie and buttoning his jacket with the casual confidence of a man who held a royal flush. "Before I begin my client's defense, I'd like to ask the court's indulgence for a brief demonstration." He walked over to his briefcase with unhurried steps, opened it with a soft click, and withdrew a small silver object. A USB drive that gleamed under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. "You see, Your Honor, my client is a man who believes deeply in the truth. And sometimes, the truth requires us to see the complete picture, not just the carefully curated fragments that serve someone's particular agenda. Hawthorne was on his feet immediately, his earlier confidence beginning to crack around the edges. Objection, Your Honor. We haven't been provided with any notice of additional video evidence. This is highly irregular and potentially prejudicial. Your Honor, Marcus replied smoothly, his voice carrying just a hint of amusement. This isn't additional evidence. This is the complete, unedited version of the very same footage we just witnessed. Mr. Blackwood installed a comprehensive security system in their home 2 years ago. A system that Mrs. Blackwood was not only fully aware of, but had, in fact, specifically requested for their mutual protection. I could see Sarah's face beginning to pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white with tension. I stood up, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins like electricity. Your Honor, may I address the court? Judge Morrison nodded, her expression curious. You may, Mr. Blackwood. I turned to face the room, looking directly at Sarah first, then addressing the gallery of spectators who had been so quick to judge me based on fabricated evidence. Your Honor, 3 years ago, after a series of break-ins in our neighborhood, including one just 2 houses down from ours, my wife came to me with a request. She was frightened, understandably so, and she asked me to install a comprehensive security system to protect our home and our belongings. I gestured toward the monitor that still displayed the frozen frame from Sarah's edited video. Sarah was particularly concerned about having cameras in the common areas of our home, the living room, kitchen, family room, places where an intruder might enter or where valuable items might be stolen. She researched different systems online, showed me reviews, even suggested specific camera placements. Sarah's confident expression was cracking now, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. He's lying, she burst out, her voice shrill. Your Honor, he's lying. Mrs. Blackwood, please remain silent unless called upon, Judge Morrison said firmly, though her tone suggested growing irritation with the outburst. I continued, my voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. I installed that security system myself, Your Honor. Every camera, every hard drive, every backup protocol. I'm a technology consultant. It's what I do for a living. And unlike my wife's conveniently edited phone recording, my system captures everything in uncompressed, uneditable format with timestamps that are verified by an external server maintained by the security company. The courtroom was dead silent now. Even the whispers had stopped as people began to understand what I was suggesting. The footage you just saw was indeed recorded in our home, on the night in question. But what you saw was a masterfully edited version designed to tell a story that simply isn't true. It was edited to remove context, to eliminate Sarah's actual behavior that night, and to make me appear violent and threatening when the reality was quite different. Hawthorne was frantically whispering to Sarah, who was shaking her head violently and looking increasingly desperate. Your Honor, I said, turning back to Judge Morrison with complete calm. May I present the original uncut footage from the security system I personally installed and have personally maintained for the past 2 years? The silence in the courtroom was so complete that I could hear the air conditioning system cycling on, the distant sound of traffic outside, even the nervous breathing of the woman sitting in the front row of the gallery. Marcus stepped forward with the USB drive, holding it up like a prosecutor presenting murder weapon. Your Honor, this drive contains the complete surveillance footage from the evening in question, as well as all the technical metadata proving its authenticity and showing the chain of custody. We'd like to present it to the court for immediate viewing. Judge Morrison looked directly at Hawthorne, her expression unreadable. Counselor, do you have any objection to viewing what the defendant claims is the complete footage from that evening? Hawthorne's usual bluster seemed to have evaporated entirely. He looked at Sarah, who was now staring at the floor and appeared to be hyperventilating. Your Honor, we question the authenticity of any footage produced by the defendant. Given his technical background, it would be relatively simple for him to manipulate digital video evidence. Then we'll have it authenticated, Judge Morrison replied without hesitation. I have access to digital forensics experts who can verify the integrity of video evidence. Bailiff, please assist Mr. Chen with the technical setup. And I want this footage examined by our court's technical specialist before we proceed. Your Honor, Marcus interjected, We anticipated concerns about authenticity. The footage includes embedded metadata timestamps that are automatically synchronized with an external server maintained by Secure Home Systems, the company that manufactured our security equipment. Any manipulation would be immediately apparent to a digital forensics expert. We also have a technical expert standing by who can testify to the system's operation and the footage's integrity. Judge Morrison nodded approvingly. Excellent. Let's proceed, but I want that expert sworn in to testify about the system before we view any footage. As Marcus inserted the USB drive and began navigating to the correct files, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The truth was about to emerge, and after months of accusations, lies, and character assassination, I was finally going to have my day in court. The screen flickered to life, showing a menu of video files organized by date and time. Marcus selected the file from the night in question, and I could see that it was nearly 2 hours long, far longer than Sarah's edited version. The complete footage begins approximately 30 minutes before the incident shown in Mrs. Blackwood's edited video, Marcus explained to the court. It will show the full context of what actually occurred that evening. Sarah was now visibly trembling. Hawthorne had moved his chair closer to hers and was whispering urgently in her ear, probably trying to figure out damage control strategies. Judge Morrison turned to address the technical expert who had been called to verify the footage. Sir, please state your name and qualifications for the record. Dr. Michael Stevens, Your Honor. I hold a PhD in computer science with a specialization in digital forensics. I've been analyzing digital evidence for law enforcement and legal proceedings for 15 years, and I'm certified by both the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists and the Digital Forensics Certification Board. Dr. Stevens, have you had a chance to examine this video footage? Yes, Your Honor. I performed a preliminary analysis during the brief recess. The metadata is consistent with the claims made by the defense. The footage appears to be authentic, unedited, and the timestamps are verified by external server synchronization. In my professional opinion, this video has not been manipulated or altered in any way. The courtroom was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Every eye was fixed on the monitor, waiting to see what the real story would reveal. Very well, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Chen, please proceed with the video. As the real footage began playing, the transformation in the courtroom was immediate and palpable. The earlier whispers of condemnation directed at me were replaced by gasps of disbelief and murmurs of outrage that were clearly shifting toward Sarah. The unedited video revealed the complete truth of that night, starting from the moment Sarah stumbled through our front door. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m., and even through the security camera's lens, it was obvious that she was heavily intoxicated. What the courtroom saw was nothing like the narrative Hawthorne had painted. The footage showed Sarah stumbling through the front door, barely able to walk straight in her high heels. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her dress was wrinkled and askew. She was clearly drunk, but more than that, she was belligerent. I was sitting on the couch in my pajamas and a robe, reading a book and obviously waiting up for her. The timestamp showed I'd been there for over an hour, based on the earlier footage. Sarah? My voice on the recording called out with obvious concern. Are you okay? You said you'd be home by midnight. I tried calling, but you weren't answering your phone. Don't start with me, David. Her voice slurred aggressively. I'm a grown woman. I can go where I want, when I want, with whoever I want. I don't need your permission. I know that. I wasn't asking for permission. I was just worried about you. When you didn't answer your phone and didn't come home. The unedited footage showed what really happened next. Sarah threw her purse across the room with violent force, sending its contents scattering across the hardwood floor. She kicked off her heels so aggressively that one of them hit a lamp, nearly knocking it over. She began pacing back and forth like a caged animal, her movements erratic and increasingly agitated. Worried. Or controlling. There's a big difference, you know. Are you worried? Or are you just pissed that you couldn't keep tabs on me tonight? I was worried, I repeated patiently, my voice remaining calm and level. Where were you tonight, Sarah? I called the restaurant where you said you were having dinner with clients. They said you left hours ago. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic and hostile. She began shouting, waving her arms wildly, making accusations that were clearly unfounded. You called the restaurant? You actually called to check up on me like I'm some kind of child? How dare you? How dare you spy on me? The video clearly showed me remaining seated throughout this tirade, speaking in calm, measured tones while Sarah became increasingly belligerent and unstable. I wasn't spying. I was concerned. You were supposed to be home hours ago. You weren't answering your phone, and I didn't know if something had happened to you. Something did happen to me, she screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at me. I married a controlling, paranoid man who thinks he owns me. What happened next was completely absent from her edited version. Sarah grabbed a wine glass from our coffee table, a glass that had been sitting there from earlier in the evening, and hurled it against the wall with tremendous force. The sound of shattering glass was loud enough to make me jump on the recording. Sarah, please calm down. You're drunk and you're going to hurt yourself. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. Don't you dare dismiss me like that. She kicked over a side table, sending magazines and decorative items flying. Then she began making wild accusations about affairs I'd supposedly been having, rattling off names of female colleagues and clients with whom she claimed I was cheating. The footage clearly showed me standing up and gently trying to guide her away from the broken glass on the floor, my hands never touching her roughly or aggressively. After 20 minutes of Sarah's increasingly erratic behavior, during which she threw items, made baseless accusations, and became progressively more unhinged, the moment from her edited video finally arrived. But in context, everything looked completely different. Sarah, you're clearly intoxicated, my voice on the recording said with obvious concern rather than aggression. Maybe we should talk about this tomorrow when you're feeling better and can think more clearly. There you go again? Dismissing me. Treating me like a child who doesn't know her own min. Sarah, you're clearly intoxicated, my voice on the recording said with obvious concern rather than aggression. Maybe we should talk about this tomorrow when you're feeling better and can think more clearly. There you go again? Dismissing me. Treating me like a child who doesn't know her own mind. She lunged toward me, stumbling and nearly falling over the coffee table. The footage clearly showed me standing up and gently catching her arm to prevent her from falling and injuring herself on the broken glass scattered across the floor. There was no aggression, no violence, just a husband trying to keep his intoxicated wife from hurting herself. Don't touch me, she screamed, exactly as it appeared in her edited version. But now the context was crystal clear. She was deliberately creating a scene, trying to manufacture evidence of abuse where none existed. Please, David, you're scaring me, she wailed dramatically, while the camera clearly showed me standing several feet away from her, my hands raised in a peaceful, non-threatening gesture. But the most damning moment was yet to come. The unedited footage showed Sarah suddenly stopping her theatrical performance mid-scream. She looked directly at her phone, which she had positioned on the entertainment center earlier. She checked the screen, apparently satisfied that it was recording properly, and then looked directly into the camera with a cold, calculating smile that made my blood run cold. That should be enough, she said in a normal, completely sober-sounding voice that was utterly different from her previous slurred accusations. The real me on the video looked confused and disturbed. Enough for what, Sarah? What are you talking about? Sarah's smile widened as she walked over to her phone and stopped the recording. Insurance, darling. Insurance for when I take you for everything you're worth. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Oh my God! Someone from the gallery called out in disbelief. She set him up. What kind of monster does that to her own husband? This is unbelievable. Judge Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly, her face flushed with anger. Order! Order in my courtroom! Sarah was on her feet, her face twisted with panic and rage, all pretense of victimhood completely abandoned. This is fake. He doctored this footage. Your Honor, he's a manipulative man with the technical knowledge to create false evidence. You can't trust anything he shows you. Her voice was shrill and desperate, completely different from the soft, vulnerable tone she'd used throughout the proceedings. Hawthorne was frantically shuffling through papers, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Your Honor, we request an immediate recess to examine this alleged evidence for signs of digital manipulation. My client's rights are being violated by this obvious fabrication. Sit down, Mrs. Blackwood. Judge Morrison commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. And Mr. Hawthorne, your client's outburst is doing nothing to help her credibility. Marcus stood calmly amidst the turmoil, his voice steady and professional. Your Honor, as I mentioned, we anticipated questions about authenticity. Dr. Stevens has already verified the footage's integrity. Additionally, we have the original email chain from 3 years ago where Mrs. Blackwood specifically requested the installation of these security cameras. That won't be necessary at this moment, Judge Morrison replied, though her tone made it clear she was barely containing her fury. Dr. Stevens, in your professional opinion, could this footage have been manipulated to create false evidence? Dr. Stevens shook his head definitively. Absolutely not, Your Honor. The metadata timestamps are synchronized with external servers. The file structure is consistent with the security system specifications, and there are no digital artifacts that would indicate manipulation. This footage is completely authentic. As the bailiff approached Sarah to escort her back to her seat, she spun around to face me directly, her mask finally dropping completely. The composed, victimized woman from earlier was gone, replaced by something ugly and desperate. You think you're so smart, don't you? She hissed, loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear. You think this changes anything? I'll appeal. I'll drag this out for years. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of controlling paranoid freak you really are. Mrs. Blackwood. Judge Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. You are dangerously close to being held in contempt of court. I suggest you compose yourself immediately. But Sarah was beyond caring about courtroom decorum now. Years of lies and manipulation were crashing down around her, and she was lashing out like a cornered animal. He destroyed our marriage with his paranoia and control. Those security cameras. He put them everywhere to spy on me, to watch my every move like some kind of prison warden. You asked me to install them, I said quietly, but my voice carried perfectly in the suddenly silent courtroom. I asked for security, not surveillance. There's a difference. I wanted to feel safe in my own home, not watched and monitored every second of every day. Marcus stepped forward with a manila folder. Your Honor, we have the complete email correspondence from 3 years ago where Mrs. Blackwood not only requested the security system, but specifically asked for cameras in all common areas, including the living room where this incident took place. She even sent my client links to specific camera models she wanted installed. The fight seemed to go out of Sarah all at once. She sank into her chair, her carefully styled hair now disheveled, her perfect makeup streaked with tears that were finally genuine. Tears of frustration and defeat rather than fabricated sympathy. The courtroom was buzzing with shocked whispers and exclamations of disbelief. I could see people in the gallery shaking their heads, some looking at Sarah with obvious disgust, others simply staring in amazement at the complete reversal of the narrative they'd witnessed. Hawthorne made one last desperate attempt to salvage his case. Your Honor, even if there are questions about the video evidence, we still have legitimate claims regarding the business assets, the property division, and the financial compensation my client deserves for her contributions to the marriage. Judge Morrison fixed him with a stare that could have melted steel. Mr. Hawthorne, your client just attempted to present fabricated evidence to this court. Evidence that, if accepted, could have resulted in serious legal consequences for an innocent man. She has committed perjury in my courtroom and attempted to perpetrate fraud upon this judicial system. Are you seriously suggesting I should now take her other claims at face value? The silence that followed was deafening.